This episode of the PlayStation Pursuit is brought to you by The Gun Con. Shoot your enemies, shoot your friends, get one or two, play lots of games. The Gun Con by Namco. Alright, well, welcome to the fourth episode of PlayStation Pursuit, everyone. This episode was a nice little mix of some trades, a gift from a friend, some good old-fashioned game purchases at game stores, and some other cool surprises. So I'm going to get started and kind of detail when this took place. So this was the weekend that, if you had seen my past episode of Sprite Lovers, where I had finally gotten my holy grail game for the Sega Saturn, Panzer Dragoon Saga. That same weekend I went to Albany and met up with some friends. And before we did that Albany trip, actually, Oleg, Mr. Fantastic, my good friend, and Grimsy42, aka Scott, they came to Syracuse in the morning on a Saturday, and we went garage selling. Didn't plan on anything big, just wanted to see if, had them come here, we could hang out for a little bit and see what we could get. And we get to this one garage sale that did advertise games, and there was nobody there. So that's always a plus, because usually if it advertises games, everybody's there. But I don't know if it was just the side of town it was on. There may have been a multitude of garage sales and neighborhood sales elsewhere, so maybe that's what diverted traffic, but there was no one but us there. So we saw a box with some Atari games in it, and there was a good amount of them, like at least 50 Atari games. And even though none of the three of us collect Atari games, there was a few other random things in there that we were able to get. Oleg, who was going for a complete Dreamcast set, got a Dreamcast browser disc, so something for his Dreamcast set. And then I happened to find a PlayStation game, and it was the only one in the box, but I didn't have it, and that is Scrabble. Crossword games. I don't know why you need a subtitle on Scrabble. I think everybody knows what it is. But it was in great shape, and I think the only problem... I thought the disc or the case might have had a little wear at the bottom hinge, but nope. So got that game. It's a common. It's one I didn't have, and it was in the box we got. And Scott had gotten some Famicom carts that were in there, which was pretty cool. Unexpected, too, to see them in there. And then we asked if they had any more game stuff, and the lady there said they did, but they do some selling on eBay, and she didn't want to take out the stuff that wasn't supposed to be sold in the sale, yada yada. There was kind of a little back and forth, but we said we'd wait. So we left for a little bit, checked out another garage sale, and then we came back, and we just waited. We said we'll patiently wait here for whoever needs to confirm what's for sale. She probably was getting antsy, and so finally she brought out another box, and it was mostly Atari stuff that we didn't want. But we looked at how many boxes were there, or how many games were there in the two boxes, and we ended up spending, we split the cost three ways, spending $15 a piece to get everything there. So we had over 100 games here. And we decided to bring them to Voltage Video Games to trade them in for credit, since I just had success doing that with the Wii games that I brought there. But we decided to try it with these games that we got at the sale. So it was kind of like an investment in this box of games. And it was a good thing, too, because there was over 100 games there. So it added up, and we ended up getting triple the total investment between all three of us each. So each one of us got between $50 and $60 in credit. So really awesome. And of course, since I had that credit, I was going to use it for a PlayStation game. And the game that I got was previously, like I thought, it was probably about a $30 to $40 game. And I looked online, and it's really going 50 plus, and I actually had it marked for $75. So I was like, I'm probably never going to get this game. But with my store discount and the trade credit, I only ended up paying $4 cash to get this, and that is Batman Forever, the arcade game. It's not the best game, but if anybody has played the Genesis or Super Nintendo Batman Forever games, you know those are some of the worst games of all time, and this is a lot better than those. Even though it's still probably a bad game if you got down to it, it's so much better than the other ones that I'm used to playing before. This is more of a traditional style beat 'em up, left to right. You can move up and down the screen, kind of like a Streets of Rage or Final Fight, but the other one is like a side-scrolling platformer with Mortal Kombat controls. Awful, did not work at all. It's kind of like if you've ever played Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero, another game that kind of feels like that. But being that it jumped up in price, I was glad to be able to use credit to get this and not have to worry about spending a whole lot on a game that might not be that good. So that was pretty cool. And then before we left the Syracuse area, Scott actually gave me a common game that I didn't have for the collection. And I believe he said there's 2 variants to the cover art, so I'll have to keep an eye out for the other one. And that is Andretti Racing. So EA Sports racing game that I didn't have. So thank you, Scott, for that. Good to have that in the collection. And then I guess my friends were just really feeling generous because when I got to Albany, I noticed Oleg had a duplicate game in like a other pile of PS1 games he had, and he goes, "Oh, I must have accidentally got it." And it's a very cheap game, but I didn't have it, and he let me have it for free. So thank you, Oleg. I appreciate that. The game is actually a sequel to another game that I have for PS1, and that is Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Lone Wolf. So it's one of the expansion missions with some solo campaigns. So pretty cool to pick that one up. So while I was in Albany visiting my friends and doing a little game hunting, we stopped at the usual stores that we go to, and one of them had some cool games that I was kind of looking at, but the prices were either off, and then my buddy Johnny had a bad experience at the store, and I witnessed it, and it kind of just turned me off from buying anything at the store. So we left that one store, but I did get some success at a Pastime Legends store, and that's a really nice chain in Albany, New York. They have 3 stores, and we went to 2 of the 3 on this trip. We went to the downtown Albany one, and we went to the Troy location, which is right around the corner from a restaurant we like to go and eat at called B-Rad's. Really good if you're in town. But the Troy location always has something. We always like go in there and find a few things. And I was looking at some common PS1 games that are, or lesser, I guess they aren't too common. They're a little more uncommon, but they're cheaper. So I was like, yeah, you know what, I might get this one here. It's $2, this one's $3. But then I looked up, and on the wall I saw a displayed box that I was like, is that got everything in it, or is it just a box? And I saw a price tag on it that was their price tag and not an old one. So I asked them if I could see it, and sure enough, it was complete in box and in very good shape. In fact, the outer box is the only thing that really has any wear. Everything on the inside looks brand new. And that game I didn't have, either the regular version or this version, and that is Time Crisis. And it comes with the gun, and what's cool is I already have the gun con, so this is my second gun con, and I'll be able to play multiplayer in this and other shooters for the system. I don't have any of the point blank games, but that's a good light gun series. So really happy to find this. It was at a really good price, and I'm not going to open it up just because it's cumbersome and got multiple parts, but it has a beautiful copy of the game. The disc looks like it was never taken out. It even had that same like snap when you have a new game. So I don't know if it was ever played. And underneath that were all the inserts, crisp, no bends or folds or anything in them, and then the gun under that. So really cool to get this. It's a kind of a neat shelf piece, and it's a game I didn't have, and I'm really happy to have 2 gun cons and get it all at a really good price. So that was an awesome find, and even though it was the only thing I got while I was in Albany, the only game I bought while I was in Albany, it was such a cool addition to the collection. So I was really, really happy with that. We didn't get to go to Forgotten Freshness, which is one of my favorite stores in the area. It's in Mechanicville, actually, which is just northeast or northwest of Albany. But I did message the owner to see if he had a game there for PlayStation 1, and he did. So I ordered it, and generous guy he was able to mail it to my house. So a couple days later, after I got back, I did get this game. I'll show you what that game is, and one more really good game I got in a trade after I talk about this episode's 3 PlayStation recommendations that are my favorites. Alright guys, I am going to talk about 3 more of my favorite PlayStation 1 games. I got a nice little variety of them today. So I'm going to start with a little game called Herc's Adventures. Now, the best thing I can compare this game to, if you've never heard of it, is the Zombies Ate My Neighbors game for Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis. It's top-down, 2-dimensional, and has a lot of funny humor to go along with the gameplay, and then the enemy design, the story, and it just really does play a lot like those games. You have the top-down view, like I mentioned. You have different items and weapons you can get along the way, and similar health power-ups to that game, only they're set in ancient Greece. So there's actually hero sandwiches, I think, like that, and stuff that you can have for food. So it's funny because it's got the some of the modern Greek humor mixed in with the ancient Hercules era. And there's cool enemies. They're really big, oversized sprites of like cyclopses and stuff, and it's really cool. It's got a little bit of a Legend of Zelda feel in the world. It's like a world map kind of thing. So that's one thing that separates it from the Zombies Ate My Neighbor gameplay, whereas that was like levels. This is like one interconnected map, but really cool game. I actually first played it on the Sega Saturn when I was a kid. Really liked it, and I was hunting it down for a while, and decided to go with the PlayStation 1 version long before I was deciding to collect the full set. But very glad to have it. I think it was probably just because it was easier to find. But even still, it took me quite a few years to find it for a good price. But it's a really fun game. It's got the animated cinematics that are throughout it, and some of the big enemies and hero characters and side characters, they actually have like voice acting and stuff. And it reminds me a lot of the kind of voice acting you'd find in a old point-and-click adventure game like Sam & Max or Monkey Island. It kind of reminds me of something like that in terms of its characters and stuff. And it is made by LucasArts, so it probably has some of the same people who worked on those games, so I definitely can see that. But a lot of fun, great co-op game, and it was pretty challenging. I think I remember there were some parts that got pretty hard. So pretty cool game though. I wanted to recommend this one when I talked about my favorite games, because it's just a very old school type of game, but with a lot of 32-bit sprite work that couldn't have been done before the PlayStation era. So really cool. If you can find this one, check it out. Alright, so my second game recommendation for the PlayStation 1 is actually a Diablo clone. And I know there's a Diablo on the PlayStation 1, but this one just completely didn't know anything about it until one day I decided to try it, because I got it for $1 or $2. It's really a super cheap game. And that game is called Darkstone. And when you pop it in, first thing you'll notice is it plays like a Diablo clone. You have some towns and stuff, but you go dungeon crawling and get loot, and there's a lot of randomized loot in it and stuff, and you level up along the way. So it's like kind of an action RPG, and it's got a really cool style. Whereas Diablo was a two-dimensional game, it had like, it was isometric, but it was sprite based and everything. This is fully 3D, and it has a little bit of that PS1 jank, but I actually thought the graphics were pretty impressive, because you can move the camera in and out. Even though it's top down, you can have it like closer or farther, and it was just a lush, the maps are very lush. They have lots of trees, the caves have cool lighting, there's cool magic spells you can get, and it's funny because it's a very simple Diablo clone game. Like, it's very simple. There's not too much it does differently than other games in the genre, but it was just really fun. It was a solid title, and it kind of surprised me. Like I said, I didn't know anything about it, and I think it may have launched as a budget title. That's just from something I'm remembering. Can't confirm or deny that, but I think it was budget. But all I know is now it is like a $2 to $3 game, probably no more than $5 game. So I do have a history of $1 to $5 games being quirky and fun that I enjoy, but this one was one of the ones that just kind of took me off guard. And like I said, good art style, really cool music. It's got a lot of voice acting that reminds me of other games in this era where it was like early voice acting, but there was, it's pretty good. It's a little cheesy, but I liked it. And I think it's created by, it's published by Take-Two, who Take-Two Interactive did like the Grand Theft Auto games and stuff, and then Delphine Software, and they made one of my favorite games on the 16-bit platforms, and that's Flashback: The Quest for Identity. Nothing like that game, but just noticed that it was that company that worked on it. Really cool though. I mean, it is really unique in that it has for this era, it has a lot of 3D character models for the enemies and stuff. I mean, there's a ton of enemies in the game, and they follow the typical fantasy tropes and everything, but really cool. There's shops and stuff in the towns that serve different purposes for buying items. There's inns, there's magic and weapons, armor, etc., all that stuff. But really cool. I thought, I found out this now, but back in the PS1 era where, you wouldn't really judge as much based on the graphics of the time because they were what the graphics were at, it would have been a pretty impressive game. But even now, I think it holds up well, and nobody talks about it, so I think you should definitely check this out. If you like dungeon crawling, loot gathering, action RPGs, this is definitely one to look out for. All right, and the last game that I wanted to talk about this episode is a port of a game that's been on many platforms before. It was a PC game, came to the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64. I really love this version. Now, the game that I'm talking about is Quake 2. And Quake 2, fantastic game on the PC. It was very revolutionary at the time. It was 3D character models, and, so was the first Quake 2. It was the fact that other than most Doom clones of the time, they were still using the same graphics engine as Doom and Wolfenstein and all that, but this was like fully 3D, and then Quake 2 improved on that in many ways. Some ways I kind of like the gothic horror feel of Quake 1, but Quake 2 is awesome with the space aliens and all this stuff, and it's this port here is really cool because it has PlayStation graphics, but it really runs really well and reminds me of if you played the PC version without the texture smoothing, which I have. I've tried it before without, so it's a little more pixelated, and it's really a solid port. It's more true to the PC version than the N64, and the N64 one was kind of like a more colorful, although more blurry, and I don't know, it was a more arcadey feeling I felt, whereas this feels like a port of the PC version. The only thing about this one that's kind of unfortunate is it has a lot of little loading screens. It reminds me if you've ever played Half-Life 1 or 2, how there's like a gameplay chunk and then there's a little loading screen between rooms and stuff, but it never loads while you're in the middle of battle or anything like that. It's just the interconnected area, so it's like the game is built in little bite-sized chunks of this part of the level, this part of the level. It's not like it loads the whole level at once, but really cool game. I've never played this in split screen though, so I don't know how the multiplayer is on this version, but it does have it. It has multi-tap capability, so it says 1 to 4 players, so 4-player split screen would be kind of cool on this. But I wanted to talk about my favorite feature of this game, and that is that it supports the PlayStation mouse, which I actually happen to have. And so you can play this with the mouse in one hand, and then on the PlayStation controller you can use the square, triangle, circle, and X buttons, almost like the arrow keys or the AS DW keys on a PC. So you can control it with keyboard and mouse style controls, and it works awesome. I mean, it runs really smooth. The game, I don't think it's 60 frames per second, but it's got a great smooth frame rate, at least 30 solid, and it really emulates that feel of the PC version. That with the fact that it has the same levels and it's not its own game like the N64 version, and by being on CD and not on a cart, this has the same soundtrack as the PC, which had a really cool industrial soundtrack. So just really cool that they ported this to the PlayStation so well. And it says id Software put it on there, but in Activision, but there's I think it's Hammerhead Studios, which is kind of neat because I believe they're still making games to this day, and they did a fantastic port of this. It's just really awesome. And even though it's a game that a lot of people have played, especially on PC, I really wanted to shout out the PlayStation version because they did a fantastic job in it. And the PS1 isn't as known for first-person shooters. I mean, there are definitely a few more, one I'll probably talk about in a future episode. But this is a really good one. This one just, I was really impressed that they emulated the mood and feel of the PC game on the PS1. So if you haven't played any Quake 2, this is a pretty good version to play. And if you have played it before and you want to check out how this version is, it's a very, very solid port. So check this one out. Okay, so I'm going to finish off the 2 remaining games for this episode. One is the one I mentioned earlier from Forgotten Freshness in Mechanicville, and then the other one is a pretty epic trade that I got. So the game that I got from Forgotten Freshness, I've been looking for over a year, and I just can't find it at stores. And I found it one time, and it didn't have a manual, so I held off. And I'm glad I did because I got a mint copy, and that is Strikers 1945, and it is a shoot 'em up, and got like World War II, kind of like a 1942, 1943 planes in it, or 1945, I guess, but similar to those games. And been looking for this for a while. Really, really happy to have it. And I want to thank Frank from Forgotten Freshness for hooking me up with that. So really cool to have that in the collection now. And then keeping with the shoot 'em up genre theme, actually, this is the big title of this episode. I actually traded Oleg a game that was one of those games that I didn't really want to part with, but it was one of those that I'd part with if it would be something of equal or more importance. I won't say value, even though it is pretty much equal value, but equal importance to me to have me get rid of one of the games that I'm not selling. So I traded him Guardian Heroes for the Saturn, and I got this game, which I did not realize spiked in price so much, and that is R-Type Delta. And it's supposed to be one of the best shoot 'em ups on the system. I have R-Types for PlayStation already, which is R-Type 1 and 2 on a disc, but this one is the newer, more advanced one. It's still on a two-dimensional plane, but it's got 3D graphics and great effects. It's supposed to be amazing, and it's in amazing shape. He found it at a store near him, and he already had it, so this would have been his if he didn't already have it, but since he did have a copy, he was kind enough to pass along his find to me, so that ended up being the greatest find of the month. So Oleg, thank you so much for that trade. We'll just add that to the number of awesome trades that took place that weekend, and if you haven't seen those trades, check out both mine and Mr. Syntastic's episodes on the weekend, because they were really fun, and it's filled with a few laughs and other silly moments. So, but that's pretty much this episode. I actually have a count of what number I'm at, and I want to make sure I'm confirming the full amount, so I don't want to say the total yet of games that are on the system, but I now have 296 games for my PlayStation as of right now. So I do know there's just under 1,300 games. That exact number, like I said, I'm waiting to find out, but I'm at 296 now, so wanted to let you guys know exactly where I'm at in my collecting, and I'd say that's a pretty good start considering this is only the 4th episode. What I already had plus what I've gotten over the first couple episodes, I really feel like I got a good momentum going and a good mix of game, not just getting the common games. I'm getting a good mix of some of the higher end stuff, some middle of the road stuff, and then the common and cheaper sports stuff as well. So gonna keep chugging along, and glad to have a lot of friends who are helping me in this pursuit. And thank you again, everybody who's been watching these episodes, because it's been a lot of fun doing this. So that's all for this week, but definitely keep an eye out for another episode in the future. This collection is going to keep going, and I'm glad to take you guys along for the ride. Thanks for watching. Bye.